The grand hall of the Galactic Council Station gleamed with lights from 1,000 worlds. Marcus Webb stood among the human delegation, trying not to look as nervous as he felt. After 50 years of observation, humanity was finally being welcomed into the galactic community. The ceremony had been going smoothly until now. Ambassador Lyra Kane stood beside him, her diplomatic smile perfect as always. She had spent decades preparing for this moment. Around them, hundreds of alien species watched from their seats, some with multiple eyes, others with sensory organs humans couldn't even name. The air smelled strange. A mixture of different atmospheres carefully balanced for the diverse attendees. Overseer Tharn approached them, his forearms moving in what humans had learned was a gesture of welcome among his people, the Kelthics. His voice came through the translation device everyone wore. The final step of integration requires a simple scan. It is standard procedure for all new species. Our Mindweaver will ensure compatibility with the Council's telepathic network. Marcus had read about Mindweavers in the briefing documents. They were one of the most respected telepathic species in the galaxy. Their ability to read and understand minds had made them invaluable as mediators, judges, and counselors. The briefing had said the process was harmless, just a gentle touch and a momentary connection. Velthor stepped forward from the Council's inner circle. He was tall and slender, his skin crystalline and refracting light into soft colors. 3 eyes arranged in a triangle on his face regarded Marcus with what seemed like curiosity. He had performed this ceremony thousands of times with dozens of species. It was routine. "Do not be alarmed," Velthor said, his voice musical and calm. "This will only take a moment. I will simply touch your hand and observe the surface thoughts. It is no more invasive than a handshake among your people." Marcus nodded and extended his hand. He thought of nothing in particular, just the usual stream of consciousness that ran through his mind. He wondered if the ceremony would end soon, hoped the dinner afterward wouldn't be too strange. Reminded himself to message his sister back on Earth. Velthor's crystalline fingers touched Marcus's palm for 1 heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then Velthor's 3 eyes went wide. The colors flowing through his crystalline skin began flashing rapidly, cycling through shades no one in the chamber had ever seen from a Mindweaver. His mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Then he screamed. It wasn't a physical scream. It was something deeper. Something that bypassed the ears entirely and struck directly at the consciousness of every telepathic being in the chamber. The sound that did emerge from Velthor's throat was merely an echo of the psychic shriek that rippled outward like a shockwave. All around the hall, telepathic species clutched their heads. Some fell from their seats. Others began making distressed noises in their own languages. The translation devices couldn't keep up with the chaos. Velthor's hand remained locked on Marcus's for 3 more seconds, though it felt like an eternity. His body convulsed, his crystalline skin now flashing between complete darkness and blinding brightness. Finally, he tore his hand away and collapsed to the polished floor. His body seizing violently, Marcus stood frozen, his hand still extended, completely unaffected. He looked down at Velthor in shock. "What happened?" "I didn't do anything." Medical teams rushed forward with equipment. Ambassador Kane immediately moved to Marcus's side, her diplomatic mask cracking to show genuine concern. "Don't move. Don't say anything." Around them, the chaos intensified. The other Mindweavers in the chamber were broadcasting distress. One of them, a younger one named Krill, was crying out. I felt it too. We all felt it. Like falling into a star. Like drowning in light and darkness at the same time. Security forces began surrounding the human delegation. Overseer Tharn was shouting orders, his forearms gesturing rapidly. The carefully orchestrated ceremony had become a disaster in seconds. On the floor, Velthor's convulsions began to slow. Medical staff worked over him with devices that hummed and glowed. But even unconscious, he was still broadcasting. Fragments of images and sensations leaked from his mind into the minds of nearby telepaths. They described what they felt in confused, frightened terms. Millions of voices, an ocean of memory. Layers upon layers. Going down forever. pain and joy and rage all at once. The generations compressed into a single moment. The head physician, a being with gray-scaled skin, looked up at Overseer Tharn with all three of her eyes wide. We need to move him to isolation immediately. His mind is still connected to whatever he touched. If he keeps broadcasting, he could harm every telepath on this station. The broadcast reached the galactic network within minutes. Camera drones had captured everything. Across thousands of worlds, billions of beings watched the moment a respected Mindweaver touched a human and collapsed in apparent agony. The networks exploded with speculation. Did the human attack him? Is this a weapon we didn't detect? Are humans dangerous to telepathic species? Should they be allowed in the council? In the medical bay, Velther was placed in a telepathic isolation chamber. The walls were designed to contain psychic broadcasts. Through the transparent barrier, they could see him lying motionless. His crystalline skin still flickering with unstable colors, Marcus sat in a different room. This one clearly designed as a holding cell despite the comfortable furniture. Ambassador Kane had been allowed to stay with him, but armed guards stood outside. Through the window, he could see the stars and the curve of Axios Prime below. "Tell me exactly what you were thinking when he touched you," Kane said quietly. Marcus shrugged helplessly. "Nothing unusual. Just normal thoughts. I was thinking about the ceremony, about messaging my sister, wondering what dinner would be like. Just ordinary stuff." Kane's expression was troubled. "They're going to quarantine all of us. Maybe send us back to Earth. This could end humanity's chance at joining the Council before it even begins." In the Council chambers, an emergency session was already underway. Only senior members were present, and the discussion was heated. Director Pox of Galactic Intelligence stood at the center. Her gray reptilian features expressionless as she reviewed data on holographic displays. "We have performed telepathic scans on over 300 species," she said, her voice cold and analytical. "Never has there been a reaction like this. The human appeared to do nothing, yet the result was catastrophic. Until we understand what happened, I recommend full quarantine of the human delegation and suspension of their integration." The vote was swift and unanimous. Humanity's welcome ceremony had become humanity's isolation. In the medical bay, Velther finally opened his three eyes. The medical staff leaned in, concerned. His first words were whispered, barely audible, but they were recorded by the monitoring equipment. "I saw everything," he said, his voice trembling. "Every human I've ever studied in our observations. We thought we understood them. We thought we knew what we were dealing with." He paused, his crystalline skin flickering dark. "We were wrong. So terribly wrong. They're not what we think they are at all." The physician tried to calm him. "Rest now. You've been through trauma." But Velther gripped her arm with surprising strength. "You don't understand. When I touched him, I didn't touch one mind. I touched thousands, millions, all compressed into a single human consciousness. How do they live like that? How do they function with that weight?" Word of Velther's statement reached the senior council members within the hour. In their secure chamber, they looked at each other with growing concern. Director Pox brought up the archived files, documents that had been sealed for centuries. "There have been others," she said slowly. "Other species that cause similar reactions in telepaths. 3 of them in the last 1,000 years. Each time they were classified as incompatible." Overseer Tharn's forearms crossed over his chest. "What happened to those species?" Director Pox's expression didn't change. "They were relocated, removed from the Council territories. The records list them as quarantined on isolated worlds. For the safety of telepathic civilization, where are they now?" Tharn asked. Pox pulled up coordinates on the display. "The locations are marked as restricted. The last recorded contact was 700 years ago." In his holding cell, Marcus stared out at the stars, unaware that his simple handshake had just uncovered a secret the Galactic Council had been keeping for centuries, unaware that 3 other species had vanished from galactic society for the same reason. He was now locked away. All he knew was that everything had gone wrong, and he had no idea why Marcus had been in the observation facility for 3 days. The room was comfortable enough, with a bed, a desk, and a window showing the stars, but he knew it was a cell. Sensors covered every surface, monitoring everything from his brain waves to his body temperature. Scientists studied him through the transparent walls like he was an experiment. He tried to stay calm. Ambassador Kane visited twice a day, updating him on the political situation. It wasn't good. Half the council wanted to expel humanity immediately. The other half wanted more investigation first, but nobody was arguing for letting them join anymore. "They're scared," Kane told him during her morning visit. "The footage of Velthor's collapse has been viewed billions of times across the galaxy. Every telepathic species is demanding answers." Marcus pressed his palm against the transparent barrier between them. "I didn't do anything. I swear I was just thinking normal thoughts." "I know," Kane said. "That's what makes them even more scared." Director Pox had taken personal control of the investigation. She was a Cyverine, a species known for their analytical minds and lack of emotion. Her gray reptilian face showed no expression as she reviewed the data from Marcus's scans for the 100th time. Everything appeared normal. Human brain patterns were different from most species, certainly, but not dangerously so. The scans showed nothing that could explain what happened to Velthor. She had brought in a human expert, Dr. Nora Hayes, a neuroscientist from Earth. Hayes was brilliant but clearly uncomfortable in the alien environment. Pox watched her study the brain scan data with human eyes that seemed too limited compared to Cyverine multispectral vision. "Explain human consciousness to me," Pox said bluntly. "In simple terms." Hayes looked up from the displays. "Human consciousness is layered. We have our immediate thoughts, the things we're actively thinking about. But beneath that, we have the subconscious processing information we're not aware of. And beneath that, even deeper patterns. Memories we've forgotten, inherited instincts, emotional responses we don't control." "Other species have subconscious processes," Pox said. "Not like ours," Hayes replied. She pulled up a comparison chart. "Most telepathic species have very organized minds, linear, clean, their thoughts flow in predictable patterns. Humans are chaos. We think in metaphors, contradictions, multiple parallel streams. We remember things that never happened, imagine futures that never will, and our emotions color everything we think." Pox studied the data. "This chaos, as you call it, could it harm a telepath?" Hayes hesitated. "I honestly don't know. We've never had telepaths to test it on." Across the station, in the psychiatric ward, Krill sat beside Velthor's bed. The young Mindweaver had been visiting his mentor every day since the incident, despite being told to stay away. Velthor had been moved out of isolation once his broadcast stabilized, but he still seemed deeply shaken. "You should be resting," Krill said softly. "The physicians say you need more time to heal." Velthor's three eyes focused on his student. His crystalline skin still flickered with occasional dark patches. "I need to tell someone what I saw. What I felt? They won't believe me otherwise." "Then tell me," Krill said, moving closer. Velthor's voice was quiet, almost reverent. "When I touched Marcus Webb, I expected to see what I always see when scanning a new species. Surface thoughts, immediate concerns, perhaps some emotional responses. Instead I fell into layers," Velthor continued. "The human's conscious mind was there, yes, thinking about ordinary things. But beneath that, another layer. Memories from his childhood, his training, his experiences. And beneath that, more layers. Emotions he wasn't actively feeling but that colored everything. And deeper still, things that weren't his own memories at all." Krill leaned forward, fascinated despite his concern. "What do you mean?" "I've felt the weight of his ancestors," Velthor said, his voice trembling. "Not as clear memories, but as impressions, patterns, instincts. Humans carry their evolutionary history in their minds, Krill, every fear, every survival instinct, every adaptation their species made over millions of years. It's all there, compressed into their neural structure. And more than that, cultural memory, inherited trauma. The wars their species fought, the losses they endured, the triumphs they achieved. all of it layered into every single human consciousness. That's impossible, Krill said. No species could function with that much information in their minds at once. Yet they do, Velther replied. That's what terrifies me. They carry billions of consciousnesses compressed into one, and they just accept it as normal. They don't even realize how extraordinary and frightening it is. To them, this chaos is just what thinking feels like. Krill was silent for a long moment. Then he asked the question that had been bothering him. Did the human hurt you intentionally? No, Velther said immediately. He couldn't have. He wasn't hiding anything or attacking me. He was just existing as humans exist. The problem is that human existence is incompatible with telepathic contact. Their minds aren't built for it. Ours aren't built to handle them. This conversation was being monitored. Everything in the psychiatric ward was recorded for safety purposes. The conversation reached Director Pox. Within an hour, she called an emergency meeting with the Council's Senior Intelligence Committee. In a secure chamber deep in the station, she presented Velther's testimony along with her own analysis. We have a significant problem, she said, displaying data across holographic screens. If Velther's experience is accurate, and I believe it is, then every human carries this psychic density. It's not a weapon or a choice. It's simply how their species evolved, which means they are fundamentally incompatible with telepathic species. One of the committee members, an elder mindweaver named Jason, spoke up. What are you proposing? Isolation, Pox said flatly. For the safety of every telepathic species in the Council, humans cannot be allowed to integrate. One accidental touch could overwhelm any telepath. We've already seen the result. We cannot risk it happening again. Isolation where? Another member asked. Pox brought up coordinates on the display. We have protocols for this situation. There are designated quarantine worlds for incompatible species. They receive basic resources and technology, but no contact with the wider galaxy. It's for everyone's safety. The vote was swift. The committee recommended to the full council that humanity be relocated to a quarantine world. The decision would need full council approval, but with the Intelligence Committee's backing, it seemed inevitable. Ambassador Kane learned of the recommendation through her contacts in the council. She sat in her quarters reading the report with growing horror. Humanity hadn't done anything wrong, yet they were about to be exiled from galactic civilization. Before they'd even truly joined, she began digging through the historical records available to her, looking for precedents, for anything that might help humanity's case. That's when she found the references. Buried in footnotes and cross-references, mentions of other species that had been deemed incompatible. 3 species over the last 1,000 years, the Torven, the Hult, the Rin. Each had been quarantined. Each had been relocated to isolated worlds. And each had simply disappeared from all subsequent records. No follow-up reports. No status updates. Just coordinates marked as restricted and files sealed by the highest level of Council Authority. Kane contacted an information broker named Quinn, a creature of uncertain species who dealt in secrets and suppressed information. They met in a private conference room. Kane had rented in the civilian section of the station. Quinn's form was hidden beneath layers of holographic distortion, a security measure. Their voice was electronically masked. You're looking for dangerous information, Ambassador? The kind that could get both of us into serious trouble. I need to know what happened to those 3 species, Kane said. The Torven, the Hult, and the Rin. They were quarantined like the Council wants to do to humanity. Where are they now? Quinn was silent for a moment. Then data began appearing on Kane's handheld display. Coordinates to something called Refuge 9. That's all I could find. The location is marked as forbidden space. No ships are allowed within 10 light years without special authorization. What's there? Kane asked. I don't know, Quinn admitted. But those 3 species quarantine coordinates all match that location. Make of that what you will. Kane looked at the coordinates. Then she encrypted them and sent them to someone she trusted, someone whose ship was currently close enough to investigate. Captain Rita Cross of the human exploration vessel Wanderer. The message was simple. Need you to check something. Might be important for all of us. Be careful. Back in his cell, Marcus didn't know about any of this. He was simply waiting, trying not to go crazy from isolation and uncertainty. He thought about Earth, about his sister, about the life he'd left behind to be part of the delegation. He wondered if touching one alien's hand would be the thing that ended humanity's dream of joining the stars. The irony wasn't lost on him. Humans had finally reached the galaxy, only to be rejected not for being too violent or too primitive, but for being too complex. The weight of that complexity, the billions of consciousnesses that Velther had sensed compressed into Marcus's mind, felt heavier now than it ever had before. Marcus could almost feel it, the presence of all those who had come before. All the history and memory and emotion that made him human, and he wondered if that weight was really so terrible, or if the galaxy was simply too afraid of depth to appreciate it. Captain Rita Cross stood on the bridge of the Wanderer, staring at the coordinates Ambassador Kane had sent her. The location was marked on her navigation charts as forbidden space. No reason given, just a red warning that entry was prohibited by Council authority. How far are we from those coordinates? She asked her navigator, a young officer named Tom Blake. About 6 hours at current speed, Blake replied. But Captain, those markers mean serious trouble if we get caught. Rita considered this. She had known Kane for years, trusted her judgment completely. If the ambassador was asking her to break council rules, there had be a good reason. And with humanity's future in the council hanging by a thread, maybe it was worth the risk. Set course, she ordered, and keep us in stealth mode. If anyone asks, we're investigating an unusual energy reading. Ambassador Kane was making her own bold move. Using her diplomatic credentials and some creative interpretation of access rights, she had managed to get into the Council's historical archives. Not the public records, but the restricted files that required special authorization. The archive room was vast and mostly automated. Holographic displays floated in organized grids, each one containing centuries of records. Kane had help, though she hadn't told anyone about it. Quinn had provided her with access codes that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. She searched for anything related to the three species, Torvin, Hult, and Rin. The first few files were ordinary. First contact reports, cultural studies, trade agreements. Then she found the flags. Each species had been classified as telepathically incompatible after similar incidents with Mindweavers. The descriptions were eerily familiar. Telepaths who made contact reported being overwhelmed, experiencing sensory overload, perceiving too much depth and complexity. Then came the relocation orders. Each species had been given the same choice, accept quarantine on a designated world, or leave Council space entirely and never return. All three had chosen quarantine. They had been promised resources, technology, and the chance to develop their civilizations in peace. Kane found the coordinates for each relocation. They all matched. Refuge 9, but what chilled her was what came after. For each species, there were regular status reports for the first few decades, updates on population, resource use, development. Then the reports became less frequent. Then they stopped entirely. The last report for any of the three species was over 700 years old. The files were marked with a single note, monitoring concluded. Species adaptation confirmed. No further contact necessary. What did that mean? Had they thrived so well they didn't need help? Or had something else happened that the Council didn't want to record? Kane copied everything to an encrypted drive. As she was leaving the archive, a voice stopped her. Interesting reading material, Ambassador. She turned to find Archivist Tall standing in the doorway. He was ancient, a species that lived for thousands of years, with skin like old parchment and eyes that seemed to see through time itself. I have authorization, Kane said carefully. Technically, yes, Tall replied, though I suspect you're stretching the interpretation of that authorization considerably. He moved closer, his movements slow but deliberate. You're looking into the quarantine species. I'm trying to understand what happened to them, Kane said, before the same thing happens to humanity. Tall was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled up another file on the nearest display. This isn't in the official archives. It's a personal log from one of the council founders, written nearly 1,000 years ago. Kane read quickly. The log detailed a philosophical debate among the early council members. Some had argued that telepathic species should not dominate the council, that non-telepathic species brought valuable perspectives. Others had argued that telepathic unity was essential for efficient governance. The telepathic faction had won. Over centuries, they had gradually shaped the council to favor telepathic compatibility. Species that didn't fit neatly into telepathic networks were quietly encouraged to remain observers rather than full members. And species that caused discomfort or distress to telepaths, however unintentionally, were deemed incompatible entirely. The quarantine policy wasn't designed to protect dangerous species, Tall said softly. It was designed to protect telepaths from discomfort, from complexity they couldn't easily digest. The council became an echo chamber, and those who disrupted that echo were silenced. "Why are you telling me this?" Kane asked. "Because I'm old enough to remember when the council was more than it is now," Tall replied. "And I'm tired of watching history repeat itself. The founders would be ashamed of what we've become." Meanwhile, Marcus finally had a visitor besides Ambassador Kane. Dr. Hayes had requested permission to interview him directly, and Director Pox had approved it. They sat across from each other, separated by the transparent barrier. "Tell me about your dreams," Hayes said, her tablet ready to record. Marcus frowned. "My dreams? How is that relevant?" "Just humor me," Hayes replied. "When you dream, what do you experience?" Marcus shrugged. "Normal dream stuff, I guess. Sometimes I'm back on Earth, sometimes I'm in places I've never been. Sometimes the dreams don't make sense at all. Just fragments and feelings." "Do you ever dream about things you've never experienced?" Hayes asked. "Things from before you were born?" Marcus paused. "Sometimes I dream about wars. Old wars with weapons we don't use anymore. I've never been in a war, but in the dreams I know exactly what it feels like. The fear, the adrenaline, the chaos." He looked uncomfortable. "Is that weird? For a human?" "No," Hayes said. "We call it genetic memory, though that's not quite accurate. It's more like inherited neural patterns. Your brain is wired by millions of years of evolution, shaped by the experiences of your ancestors. Those patterns create echoes, impressions that feel like memories even though they're not yours personally. That's what Velther felt?" Marcus asked. Hayes nodded slowly. "I think so. When he touched your mind, he didn't just experience your thoughts. He experienced all those layers, all those echoes. Millions of years of human history compressed into your neural structure. For a species with ordered, linear minds, it must have been like falling into an ocean when you expected a puddle." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "So I'm dangerous just by existing around telepaths?" "You're complex," Hayes corrected. "There's a difference. Captain Cross and the Wanderer dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Forbidden Zone. Sensors immediately began scanning the area. What they found was unexpected. "Captain, I'm reading structures on the fourth planet," Blake reported. "Multiple settlements. Power signatures. They're inhabited. By who?" Cross asked. "Unknown. But Captain, I'm reading 3 distinct technological signatures. 3 separate civilizations on the same planet." Cross ordered a closer approach, carefully avoiding any patrol routes. As they got nearer, the picture became clearer. Refuge 9 wasn't a prison or a dying colony. It was a thriving world with cities, agriculture, industry. 3 separate species living together, their territories distinct but peaceful. "Can we make contact?" Cross asked. "Risky," her communications officer replied. "But I can send a type beam message to one of the population centers." They tried. The response came within minutes, and it was in perfect galactic standard language. "Unknown vessel, this is Elder Voss of the Torvin Council. Your presence here is unusual. State your purpose." Cross took a breath and opened the channel. Elder Voss, this is Captain Rittercross of the human vessel Wanderer. We're investigating the fate of species relocated here by the Galactic Council. We didn't expect to find you thriving." There was a long pause. Then Voss replied, his voice carrying both warmth and bitterness. "Thriving, yes. Because we had no choice. The Council didn't destroy us, Captain. They simply abandoned us, gave us a world, and left us to survive on our own. Can we meet?" Cross asked. "We need to understand what happened. Humanity may face the same fate." "Ah," Voss said, and there was something knowing in his tone. "Another species too complex for telepathic comfort." "Yes, Captain Cross, come down. We have much to discuss." Back on the Council station, Director Pax was presenting her final report to the full Council. Hundreds of delegates filled the chamber, representing species from across the galaxy. The vote on humanity's fate was scheduled for the next day. "The evidence is clear," Pax said, her voice carrying to every corner of the massive room. "Humans represent a telepathic hazard. Not through malice, but through their fundamental nature. For the safety of all telepathic species in the Council, I recommend immediate relocation to Refuge 9, where they can live without posing a risk to others." Overseer Tharn looked troubled. "This seems extreme." "They've done nothing wrong." "Intention is irrelevant," one of the Mindweaver delegates said. "The safety of billions of telepathic citizens must take priority." The debate went on for hours. Some argued for compassion, others for caution, but the momentum was clearly toward relocation. Fear was winning. Then Ambassador Kane stood up. "Before this Council votes, there's something you all need to see." She activated her display, broadcasting it across the chamber. Footage began playing, transmitted from Captain Cross on Refuge 9. It showed the three species living together. Their cities built side by side, their people cooperating and thriving. "The species you abandoned are still alive," Kane said, her voice cutting through the sudden silence. "You didn't relocate them for their safety. You hid them because they made you uncomfortable. And now you want to do the same to humanity." The chamber erupted. Some delegates demanded to know how she got that footage. Others wanted to know why the Council had concealed the fate of the relocated species. The telepathic delegates tried to regain control, but the damage was done. The secret was out. The galaxy would have to confront what the Council had become, and whether that was what it wanted to be. In his cell, Marcus watched the bro. Adcast on his display, barely able to believe what he was seeing. Maybe there was hope after all. Or maybe things were about to get much worse. The galactic network exploded with reaction to Ambassador Kane's revelation. Within hours, every major news outlet across thousands of worlds was broadcasting the footage from Refuge 9. The three supposedly relocated species hadn't just survived. They had built a successful civilization together. And the Council had never mentioned them again after abandoning them centuries ago. Public opinion fractured along predictable lines. Non-telepathic species expressed outrage at the deception. Many telepathic species defended the Council's actions as necessary for safety. But some voices, particularly younger generations, questioned whether hiding entire civilizations was ever justified. On the Council station, emergency sessions ran day and night. But instead of unity, the revelation had created chaos. Delegates shouted at each other across the chamber floor. Security had to intervene twice to prevent physical confrontations. High Seer Jalith emerged as the leader of the telepathic faction. She was a powerful mindweaver, older than Velthor, with influence across dozens of worlds. Her crystalline skin was darker than most of her species, almost black, and when she spoke, her three eyes blazed with conviction. "This sentimentality is dangerous," she declared before the assembled council. "Yes, we separated those species from our civilization. And yes, they survived. That proves the policy worked. They were given worlds, resources, and freedom from the telepathic networks they couldn't integrate with. Everyone benefited." "You abandoned them," shouted a delegate from one of the non-telepathic species. "We protected ourselves," Jalith countered. "And we protected them from constant rejection and isolation." Tell me, would you want to live in a society where your mere presence causes others pain? Where a simple touch could hospitalize someone? The relocated species are happier on Refuge 9 than they would have been struggling to fit into a civilization not built for them. Ambassador Kane stood to respond. You didn't give them a choice. You made that decision for them. Because they couldn't make it rationally, Jalith said, her voice cold. Humans especially. Your species is emotional, chaotic, driven by feelings rather than logic. You want to join us because you're fascinated by the galaxy, but you don't understand the consequences. One human walking through a crowded station could hospitalize dozens of telepaths through accidental contact. Is that the future you want? Before Kane could answer, alarms began blaring. Security alerts flashed across every display in the chamber. A fleet had just arrived in orbit around Axios Prime, a human fleet. General Torres had brought 12 vessels, including 3 military ships capable of significant firepower. They held position just outside the station's defensive perimeter, making no aggressive moves but sending a clear message through their presence. Torres broadcast on all channels. This is General Maria Torres of Earth Defense Command. We're here to ensure the safety of our delegation and to demand answers about the threats being made against humanity. We have no desire for conflict, but we will not allow our people to be forcibly relocated without their consent. The council chamber went silent. This was unprecedented. No species had ever brought military vessels to a council integration ceremony. The act itself was a violation of protocols, but the humans clearly didn't care about protocols anymore. Director Pox immediately ordered the station's defenses to active status. Council military ships began moving into position. Within minutes, 2 fleets faced each other across the darkness of space. Neither side willing to back down, Overseer Tharn rushed to establish communication with Torres. General, your presence here is highly inappropriate. You're violating council space with military vessels. Torres appeared on the main display, her expression hard. With respect, Overseer, imprisoning our diplomat and threatening to exile our entire species is also inappropriate. We're done playing by rules that seem designed to exclude us. You're making this worse, Tharn said, his forearms gesturing in distress. The Council is debating humanity's future peacefully. This show of force will only convince them you're dangerous. They already decided we're dangerous, Torres replied. For existing. For being too complex for their comfort. Maybe it's time we showed them what actually being dangerous looks like. The standoff continued for hours. Neither side fired, but weapon systems remained active. On the station, people evacuated to emergency shelters. The carefully planned integration had become a potential war. Ambassador Kane worked desperately behind the scenes, trying to build a coalition of support. She found an unexpected ally in Ambassador Wren of the Drell, a species of small, quick-moving beings with keen intelligence and natural diplomatic skills. Wren met with her in a secure conference room. My people were almost classified as telepathically incompatible 200 years ago, he said quietly. We managed to avoid it through political maneuvering and compromises. But it was close. Too close. Why are you telling me this? Kane asked. Because I know what you're facing, and I know how the Council really works, Wren replied. The telepathic species don't mean to be cruel. They genuinely believe they're doing what's best for everyone. But they've built a civilization around their own comfort, and anything that disrupts that comfort is seen as a threat rather than a gift. How do we change that? Kane asked. You need to show them that diversity isn't just tolerable, it's valuable, Wren said. But honestly, I'm not sure how. The telepathic faction has been dominant for so long that they can't imagine any other way. While politicians argued and fleets faced off, something unexpected was happening in the psychiatric ward. Krill had been visiting Marcus, despite orders to stay away from the human. The young Mindweaver was fascinated rather than frightened by what had happened. Can I try something? Krill asked during one of his visits. I want to understand what my mentor experienced. Marcus hesitated. What if it hurts you like it hurt Velthar? I'm prepared this time, Krill said. And I'm younger, more adaptable. Please, I need to understand. Marcus reluctantly agreed. He extended his hand through a small opening in the barrier, one that required security override to open. Krill had gotten the override code somehow, probably from a sympathetic guard. The young Mindweaver's fingers touched Marcus's palm gently. His crystalline skin began to glow, cycling through colors, but not chaotically like Velthor S had. Slowly, deliberately, he processed what he was sensing. After 30 seconds, he withdrew his hand. His 3 eyes were wide, but not with fear. With wonder. "It's beautiful," Krill whispered. "Terrifying and overwhelming, yes, but beautiful. Like listening to a symphony with thousands of instruments all playing at once." My mentor was right. Humans carry their entire species' history within them. Every joy, every sorrow, every triumph and failure, all compressed into a single consciousness. "Does it hurt you?" Marcus asked WORIEDLY. Krill shook his head. "No, it's intense, but I was ready for it. I think the shock is what hurt Master Velthor, not the content itself. Once you know what to expect, it's manageable. Difficult, but manageable." This conversation was monitored, of course. The footage reached Velthor quickly. The older Mindweaver, still recovering in his room, watched his student's experience with complex emotions. Pride that Krill had been brave enough to try. Shame that his own reaction had been so extreme. And slowly, understanding. "He's right," Velthor said to the physician monitoring him. "The problem wasn't the humans. It was my expectations. I expected simplicity and encountered complexity. My mind rejected it rather than adapting to it." "What are you saying?" the physician asked. "I'm saying we've made a terrible mistake," Velthor replied. "We've built a civilization that prizes order over richness, simplicity over depth. And when we encounter species that retain their complexity, we label them as incompatible rather than recognizing our own limitations." Velthor made a decision. Despite his weakened state, despite the controversy it would cause, he would testify again before the council. This time, not about the danger humans posed, but about the opportunity they represented. When Hyseer Jalith learned of Velthor's intention, she moved quickly to discredit him. She held a press conference broadcast across the galaxy. "Velthor is a respected member of our community," she said, her voice full of false sympathy. "But his experience with the human has clearly damaged him. His judgment is compromised. He's suffering from a form of telepathic trauma that makes him unable to assess the situation objectively. We cannot allow his confused state to influence policy decisions that affect billions." The telepathic community split. Many agreed with Jalith, seeing Velthor's change of position as evidence of injury rather than insight. But others, particularly younger telepaths like Krill, began to question whether their elders were right. The crisis escalated when a radical group of telepathic extremists decided to take matters into their own hands. They believed the council was being too cautious, too willing to debate. They saw the human fleet as an invasion force that needed to be eliminated before it could threaten telepathic civilization. 3 ships broke formation from the council fleet and accelerated toward the human vests. Weapons charging. The attack was unauthorized, but it was happening. General Torres saw them coming and had seconds to decide. Fire back and start a war, or hold position and hope they were bluffing. She chose a third option. All ships, evasive maneuvers only. Do not return fire. I repeat, do not return fire. The human vessels scattered, their superior engines allowing them to dodge the incoming fire. The extremist ships pursued, firing repeatedly, but the humans refused to shoot back. The chase continued for 10 minutes, broadcast live across the galaxy, until council ships finally caught up and disabled the extremist vessels. No one had been killed, but the message was clear. The situation was spiraling out of control. What had started as a diplomatic incident had become a potential civil conflict within the council itself. In the council chambers, an emergency vote was called. Not on humanity's fate, but on the future of the council itself. Would they continue down the path of telepathic dominance, potentially leading to more violence and division? Or would they risk changing everything? Overseer Tharn stood before the assembly, his forearms spread wide. "We face a choice that will define us for generations. I call for a full assembly vote. Every species, telepathic and non-telepathic alike, will have their say. We will decide what kind of council we want to be. The vote was scheduled for the following day. Ambassador Kane looked at the human fleet holding position in the darkness, at Marcus still confined in his cell, at Velther preparing to testify despite threats to his reputation, everything balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong move, one more incident, and the galaxy might tear itself apart over the question of whether complexity was a gift or a curse. The Grand Assembly Chamber had never been so full. Every species in the Galactic Council sent their delegates, and millions more watched through broadcasts across thousands of worlds. The massive chamber stretched upward like a cathedral, with seating arranged in spiraling tiers that accommodated the diverse physical needs of hundreds of different species. At the center, a circular platform served as the speaking floor, illuminated by soft light from above. This wasn't just another vote. This was a decision that would reshape galactic civilization itself. Overseer Tharn opened the proceedings, his forearms raised for silence. We gather today to determine not just the fate of humanity, but the nature of our council. 3 proposals stand before us. First, immediate integration of humanity as full members. Second, relocation to Refuge 9 as per standard incompatibility protocols. Third, a complete revision of those protocols and the reintegration of all previously relocated species. The chamber buzzed with conversation. That third option was new, proposed overnight by a coalition of non-telepathic species led by Ambassador Wren. It was bold, maybe too bold. But it forced the council to confront what it had become. High Seer Jalith was the first to speak. She moved to the center platform with the grace of someone who had commanded attention for centuries. Her dark crystalline skin caught the light, and her 3 eyes surveyed the assembly with confidence. I understand the sympathy many feel for humanity, she began, her voice carrying perfectly to every corner of the chamber. They seem harmless, even charming in their chaos. But sympathy cannot override safety. We built this council on a foundation of telepathic unity. That unity allows us to resolve conflicts, to understand each other deeply, to build trust that words alone cannot achieve. She gestured to the telepathic delegates around her. Species like humans, the Torvin, the Holt, and the Rin cannot join that unity. Their minds are too dense, too chaotic, too filled with layers upon layers of uncontrolled thought and emotion. We don't blame them for this. It's simply how they evolved. But we cannot ignore the reality that their presence disrupts the very foundation of our civilization. Jalith's voice grew stronger. Yes, we relocated species in the past. And yes, they thrived on Refuge 9. That proves our approach was correct. They built their own civilization, free from the constant rejection they would have faced trying to integrate with telepathic networks. Everyone benefited. To claim this was cruel is to ignore the kindness of giving them a home where they could truly belong. She paused, letting her words sink in. If we allow humanity to integrate, we invite chaos into our ordered society. We risk the safety of every telepath who might accidentally make contact with a human. We compromise the telepathic unity that has brought us centuries of peace. I ask you, is that a risk worth taking? The telepathic delegates erupted in agreement, their voices and telepathic broadcasts creating a wave of support. For a moment, it seemed the debate was over before it truly began. Then Ambassador Kane took the platform. She looked smaller than Jalith, less commanding, but her voice was steady and clear. High Seer Jalith speaks of unity, Kane said. But I would ask, unity for whom? She speaks of peace, but what kind of peace is built on exclusion? You've created a civilization that is comfortable for telepaths, and I don't fault you for that. But comfort and justice are not the same thing. She pulled up holographic displays showing the history of the council. When this council was founded, it claimed to value all forms of intelligence, all types of consciousness. But over centuries, telepathic species gained dominance. Not through conquest, but through the simple fact that they could communicate with each other more easily. They shaped policies around their own needs, their own comfort. And gradually, species that didn't fit that mold were pushed aside. Kane looked directly at Jalith. You say you gave the relocated species a gift, a place where they could belong, but you never asked them if that's what they wanted. You made that choice for them, and then you forgot about them, filed them away as a solved problem, because their absence made you more comfortable. She turned to address the full assembly. Humanity doesn't want to disrupt your unity. We just want the chance to exist alongside it. Yes, we're complex. Yes, our minds are chaotic compared to telepathic order. But that complexity isn't a flaw. It's what makes us who we are. It's the weight of our history, the depth of our experience, the richness of our consciousness. And we won't apologize for it. The non-telepathic delegates responded with support, but the chamber remained divided. Then General Torres requested permission to speak, which was unusual since she wasn't an official delegate. "I'm a soldier, not a diplomat," Torres said bluntly. "So I'll be direct. Humanity has no desire for war. We came here seeking partnership, not conflict. But we will not be exiled for the crime of making people uncomfortable. We will not accept isolation just because our existence challenges your assumptions about how consciousness should work." She gestured to the human fleet visible through the chamber's massive windows. "Those ships out there aren't an invasion force. They're a statement. Humanity will defend its right to exist freely in the galaxy. We hope that defense can be peaceful. We hope this council can grow beyond its current limitations. But if not, we'll find our own path among the stars." Torres's words hung in the air like a challenge. The tension in the chamber was palpable. Then Velther requested to speak. The Mindweaver had been recovering in medical, but he had insisted on attending. He moved slowly to the platform, and many noticed that his crystalline skin still bore dark patches from his trauma. His testimony would carry weight precisely because everyone knew what he had experienced. "I am the one who touched Marcus Webb," Velther began. "I am the one who screamed and collapsed. I experienced firsthand the overwhelming complexity of human consciousness. And I'm here to tell you that my initial reaction was wrong." The chamber went silent. Even Jalith looked surprised. "When I touched the human, I experienced something I had never imagined possible," Velther continued. "Millions of consciousnesses compressed into one mind. Generations of memory, emotion, and experience layered together in patterns I couldn't comprehend. It was terrifying because it challenged everything I thought I knew about how minds should work." He paused, his three eyes surveying the assembly. "But terror is not wisdom. After I recovered, after I had time to process what I experienced, I realized something profound. Human minds aren't defective or dangerous. They're simply rich in ways we've forgotten how to be." Velther's voice grew stronger. "We telepathic species have spent millennia optimizing our minds for efficiency, for easy connection, for ordered thought. We've become very good at communicating with each other. But in the process, we've lost depth. We've lost complexity. We've streamlined our consciousness until it's shallow and predictable." He looked at Jalith. "Humans haven't lost that depth. They carry their entire evolutionary history within them. Every fear their ancestors felt, every triumph, every adaptation. It makes them chaotic from our perspective, but it also makes them remarkably resilient, creative, and capable of profound insight. When I touched Marcus Webb, I didn't encounter a threat. I encountered art. I encountered the kind of consciousness our own species gave up long ago." Velther's testimony shifted the mood in the chamber. Some telepathic delegates looked thoughtful rather than fearful. But Jalith wasn't convinced. "Your experience damaged you," she said. "Your judgment is compromised. You're defending the very thing that hurt you out of some misguided sense of enlightenment." Before Velther could respond, something unexpected happened. A door at the edge of the chamber opened, and a human child walked in. Lily Park, the 8-year-old daughter of one of the delegation members, had somehow gotten separated from her mother during the recess. She looked around the enormous chamber with wide eyes. Clearly overwhelmed, security moved to intercept her, but before they could, a young Mindweaver approached her. It was Krill's cousin, a child of similar age who had been sitting with the telepathic delegation. The young Mindweaver, curious about the human child, reached out her hand in the greeting gesture natural to her species. The entire assembly held its breath. Every eye in the chamber focused on those two children. Guards rushed forward, but they were too far away. The young Mindweaver's crystalline fingers touched Lily's palm. Silence. Everyone waited for the scream, for the collapse, for the repetition of what had happened with Velther. Instead, the young Mindweaver laughed. It was a sound of pure delight, musical and joyful. She didn't pull away. She held Lily's hand and made the telepathic equivalent of a happy exclamation. "It's like a garden," the young Mindweaver said in her own language, translated for all to hear, "with paths that go everywhere and flowers I've never seen before. It's wonderful." Lily, not understanding what was happening but responding to the other child's joy, smiled. "Do you want to be friends?" The young Mindweaver nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, you're interesting." The moment broke something in the chamber. It was impossible to argue that humans were inherently dangerous when a child had just made peaceful contact with one. It was impossible to maintain that they were incompatible when two children had just connected across species without fear or prejudice. Hi. Sir Jalith tried to regain control. "One successful contact doesn't prove safety. The child was simply lucky." But Elder Archivist Tall stood, his ancient voice carrying authority that even Jalith couldn't ignore. The child wasn't lucky. She was unprejudiced. She encountered complexity without fear because she hadn't learned to fear it yet. Perhaps that is the lesson we should take from this. Tall activated a display showing ancient records. The Galactic Council was founded on principles that have been forgotten. Diversity of thought, diversity of consciousness, diversity of experience. The founders believed that true wisdom came from encountering minds different from our own, not from surrounding ourselves with comfortable similarity. He looked at the assembly. Somewhere along the way, we lost that vision. We became comfortable, predictable, safe. And in pursuing that safety, we began excluding anyone who challenged us. Not because they were dangerous, but because they made us uncomfortable. Tall's words resonated through the chamber. Even some of the telepathic delegates who had supported. Jalith looked uncertain now. Then Elder Voss appeared on the main display. Transmitted from Refuge 9, the Torvin leader had been invited to address the assembly via hologram. "I speak for all the species you abandoned," Voss said, his voice carrying both dignity and pain. "We survived. We built lives. We even thrived. But we did so knowing that the galaxy had rejected us not for anything we did, but for what we are. You speak of giving us a gift, but you gave us exile. You speak of protecting us, but you protected yourselves from discomfort." Voss's image looked directly at the assembly. "We don't want revenge. We don't want apologies. We want what was taken from us, the choice to participate in galactic civilization. If you offer humanity true integration, we ask the same for ourselves. Not because we need you, but because diversity makes civilizations stronger, not weaker." The testimony from Refuge 9, combined with the moment between the two children, had shifted the momentum completely. Even Jalith could see it. The vote hadn't been taken yet, but the outcome was becoming clear. The final speaker was one of the Council Primes, ancient beings who had helped found the galactic government millennia ago. They rarely appeared, remaining in deep meditation most of the time. But Prime Eldest emerged now, a being of uncertain species so old that their original form had been forgotten. "We have listened to all arguments," Prime Eldest said, their voice seeming to come from everywhere at once. "And we have a decision to make. Not about humanity specifically, but about what kind of council we wish to be." The Prime pulled up the Council's founding charter, documents older than most species in the chamber. "When we created this institution, we envisioned a place where all forms of consciousness could meet, learn from each other, and grow together. Telepathic species were meant to be part of that diversity, not the totality of it." Prime Eldest looked at Jalith with something that might have been disappointment. The telepathic dominance that emerged was never intended. It was a deviation from our founding principles, one that grew slowly over centuries until it seemed natural. But natural and right are not the same thing. The Prime's voice grew stronger. We call for a vote not on humanity's integration, but on the Council's future direction. Do we return to true diversity, accepting the discomfort that comes with encountering truly different minds? Or do we continue down the path of comfortable homogeneity, excluding anyone who challenges our assumptions? The vote was called. Every species, telepathic and non-telepathic, had an equal say. The chamber filled with light as delegates registered their choices. The results appeared on the main display. It was close, far closer than Ambassador Kane had hoped, but it was enough. The Council voted to return to its founding principles. Humanity would be granted full integration. The species on Refuge 9 would be contacted and offered the choice to return. The quarantine protocols would be abolished. Hysier Jaleth and her faction stood abruptly. This is a mistake that will cost us dearly. We will not participate in a council that values chaos over order, danger over safety. Those species who agree with us are welcome to join our new alliance. She left the chamber, and about a quarter of the telepathic delegates followed her. The council had not achieved unity. It had instead accepted division as the price of diversity, but most remained. Most chose to try. In the days that followed, Marcus was finally released from observation. Ambassador Kane met him at the door of his cell, smiling for the first time in weeks. "We did it," she said simply. Marcus looked at his hands, the same hands that had caused so much chaos. "I still don't really understand what happened." "You existed," Kane replied. "And in doing so, you forced the galaxy to confront what it had become. Sometimes that's enough." Velthor requested a meeting with Marcus, this time without barriers. They met in a garden area of the station, surrounded by plants from a dozen worlds. The Mindweaver extended his hand slowly. "May I?" he asked. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. They shook hands, and this time Velthor was prepared. He experienced the overwhelming complexity of human consciousness, but he faced it with understanding rather than fear. When he withdrew his hand, he was smiling. "Welcome to the Council, Marcus Webb," Velthor said. "I think you're going to change everything." Ships from Refuge 9 began arriving within the month. The Torvin, the Hult, and the Rin returned to galactic civilization after centuries of isolation. They brought with them perspectives and experiences that had developed in complete independence from Council influence. General Torres and her fleet departed peacefully, their mission accomplished. As they left, human civilian vessels began arriving. Trade ships, scientific expeditions, cultural ambassadors. Humanity was joining the galaxy not with conquest but with curiosity. The Council would never be the same. Jaleth's separatist movement controlled several systems, creating a parallel government based on telepathic unity. But most species chose integration over isolation, complexity over comfort. Years later, people would look back at the moment Velthor touched Marcus Webb as the catalyst that changed galactic civilization. Not because it was violent or dramatic, but because it was honest. In that moment of contact, the galaxy had been forced to see what it had become and decide if that was what it wanted to be. The answer, narrow but clear, had been no. Humanity's chaos, their complexity, their weight of inherited consciousness became not a threat but a reminder. A reminder that depth and richness came at the cost of comfort. But that some costs were worth paying. Marcus stood on an observation deck, watching Earth rise over the curve of a space station that was now truly welcoming to his people. Beside him, Lily Park held hands with her young Mindweaver friend, the two children chattering in a mix of languages. Neither fully understood but both instinctively shared. The galaxy was larger than anyone had imagined, not in space but in the diversity of consciousness it contained. And finally, after centuries of narrowing, it was beginning to expand again, not through conquest or force, but through the simple courage to touch hands with someone different and see the beauty in what you found there, however overwhelming it might be.